Rafal Sarnecki is a Polish jazz composer and guitarist who already lived not only in Poland but also in New York, and currently is on tour, on a special tour with some other musicians in the so-called Visegrad countries, Poland, Hungary, Czechia and Slovakia. And at this tour there is a special band with each one member from these countries playing in each country 4 concerts in different cities. How you got together with the other musicians whom you are playing together with?
That's actually a very interesting story. We met in 2017 in Hangzhou in China. It was a special project. It was a big band project where every musician in the big band came from a different Central European country. So I was representing Poland, Tomasz Barosz was representing Czech Republic, Balasz was representing Hungary, and Radovan Tariska was representing Slovakia. And we kept in touch, so that the idea of having a Visegrad Jazz Exchange project came up, and we reconnected, and that's how this whole project started.
How you chose the songs, what to play today as the last concert in Hungary? You were playing in Székesfehérvár. Are you playing everywhere the same set list, or you are always changing a little bit? How you selected what songs to play as of? From all of you were some compositions in the set list.
So in these situations we obviously try to represent each country equally. So our set list includes 8 compositions. So there's 4 of us, so each of us brought 2 compositions. And I would say for the most part the set list is the same. We changed the order, but we still want to have 2 compositions for every country. And the compositions also relate partially to traditional music, like Radovan's compositions are inspired by Slovakian folk. I brought an arrangement of a Green Dolphin Street, which is a jazz standard, but it was written by a Polish composer, Bronisław Kaper, who later made a career in Hollywood, but he was born in Poland. So the idea was to bring some songs that also relate to our culture in some way.
You also lived in New York, what is one of the most important cities in the jazz culture. How is it as a place to live, especially to live there as a jazz musician?
Well, on one hand it's very inspiring. At that time, 2005, when I moved to New York, it was definitely a dream come true. So having an opportunity to study with the legendary musicians, like I went to study at the New School in New York, and let's say like 5 of my teachers played with Miles Davis. 6 of my teachers played with jazz messengers. So that was amazing. On the other hand, obviously life in New York is hard. There's just so much competition. There's so many amazing artists that it's not easy to find a place for yourself. It's not easy to make a living. But for me, in a way, it was a temporary situation. So like I was always planning to move back to Poland at some point, which happened 6 years ago. It's been 6 years since I moved back to Poland. So I definitely try to keep in touch with my friends from New York, and I come back sometimes. Just last January I went to New York. We recorded an album with a Polish trio featuring Mike Stern and Lenny Stern. So I'm definitely trying to keep in touch with the New York scene. However, living in Poland, it's definitely much easier for me as it's just much easier to make a living, much easier to play concerts for larger audiences, to have advanced students. So life in Poland is definitely easier from many standpoints.
How is the situation of the Polish diaspora in New York? Have you been together with other Polish communities, Polish people, whilst you were living in New York, or you weren't so much on that you would keep the connection with your own nation, but rather in the international jazz scene of the city?
So I definitely had many Polish friends in New York. However, there are actually very few Polish jazz musicians in New York. And part of it is probably for the reason that I mentioned before, that it's actually a little easier to be a jazz musician in Poland than in New York. Even just to go to New York, you have to go through the whole visa process. It has to be either a student visa, which means you have to have money to pay for your college or any school in the United States. So that's a pretty significant barrier. Like education in the United States is extremely expensive. These days you can study for much cheaper in Europe, and also there are some great schools. On the other hand, if you want to go to work in the United States, you also need a visa. So the jazz community Polish jazz community in New York was very small. Actually, I lived with a great Polish piano player, Kuba Cichocki, and great Polish singer, Bogna Kicińska. So I felt like we were probably like 30% of the Polish jazz community in New York at the time, like just that apartment where we stayed at. But there's obviously like a huge Polish community that's not jazz musicians. I found that the Polish community was actually pretty helpful. There's a stereotype that Polish people abroad hate each other and they try to make each other's lives harder, but actually I experienced something quite the opposite. I found the Polish community pretty helpful. They invited me to perform on many different situations, so I have good memories of that.
What motivates you to compose your melodies, your songs?
I just cannot. I have to do it to be happy. You know, like it's a natural desire to share something. Some music appears in your head. You start hearing some melodies, some chords, and it's a very natural desire to play it, to write it down, to record albums that feature that music. And even though sometimes it doesn't make financial sense, sometimes it feels like it's such a niche that no one wants to listen to it. It's an exaggeration. But to me, if you ask me why we're doing this, I would say that's the whole idea of being a jazz musician. It kind of doesn't make sense economically. When people who do business look at us, it doesn't make sense to them what we're doing, because what we're doing oftentimes is not like a solid business concept. You know, we put so much effort into it, and oftentimes it doesn't really bring a profit. So it's pretty obvious we just do it because we have such a strong desire. We have to do this, and sometimes it might happen that it might bring some income also, but that's like a side effect. So basically the idea is like you start hearing some music in your head and you want to express it through your instrument.
You told that it's easier to live as a musician in Poland than in New York. But how is the Polish jazz scene exactly? Is it mostly just concentrated to the bigger cities like Warsaw or Silesian metropole area or some other places? Or is jazz even in the smaller towns and the villages present in the current Polish culture?
In order to be a jazz musician, you kind of have to play with other artists. Like jazz is an art form that requires multiple people to create it together. I mean, technically, obviously, you have piano solo performances and guitar solo, but that's a minority. Basically, you need like jazz bands. So in order to have multiple people on a certain level of musicianship to play together, you need actually a bigger city, because in smaller towns it's hard to get multiple musicians to play together. And what's interesting in Poland is that every city in Poland has a slightly different scene. So I feel like, if we're talking about straight ahead jazz, playing standards, like the south of Poland, Krakow is a very good city for that. There's a bunch of jazz clubs that have jazz every night, and it's actual jazz that relates to American jazz tradition. It's on the other hand, in the north of Poland, like Tri-City, Gdańsk, Gdynia, there's a pretty strong, I would say, experimental avant-garde scene. In Warsaw, there is a huge community of musicians. There's maybe not as many actual jazz clubs, but musicians still find some places to perform. And also, Warsaw is the biggest city in Poland, so like if you want to play for like TV shows or things like this, it's also a place where you could do it, like be a popular pop musician. So in a way, yes, it's based mostly in the biggest cities, and every city has its own vibe, which is interesting. Within such a small country, you have different scenes.
What are your plans for the future? Do you plan, for example, to record album together with this Visegrad for exchange group, or you are just playing at these few concerts and you will not bring it as an album, or you eventually plan to record another album with other artists, or what you plan for the near future?
So right now we don't have any plans of recording with this specific Visegrad Jazz Exchange project. However, I mean, maybe sometime in the future. Actually, in just 9 days, there will be a new album released with a trio featuring 3 musicians from Poland, including myself, which is called, our last name, Sarnecki, Lemańczyk, Golicki trio, featuring Mike and Lenny Stern. That's the album that I mentioned that was recorded in New York. And besides that, I'm working on some new music right now, but it includes some music production, like recording multiple guitars, but that's something I'm working on at home. So I don't have specific plans of releasing it yet. I have some touring plans. We're supposed to have a little tour with Randy Brecker in December in Poland. And then we have a plan to go to China in January. So definitely the fall and the winter should be pretty busy.